Hey everyone, he's Kevin Kauffman, I'm Fred Weaver, and welcome to another episode of Industry Headlines, where today not only are we recording this to put on our Kevin and Fred podcast, but we're also going live into our Next Level Agents Facebook group. So thank you for joining us if you're watching live.
Yeah, we've been doing this live on YouTube for a while, decided to stream it live into Next Level Agents now. So Fred, let's jump into this week's industry headlines. What do we have on tap?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit, Kevin. We had a lot of things. I'll run through them quickly. We're going to talk about how brokerages are responding to the racial injustice and inequality that's going on in our world and our country right now specifically. We're going to talk about how Offerpad is pivoting, talk a little bit about mortgage rates. They may have hit another low, Kevin. We're also going to talk about Realogy and furloughed employees, and we'll end the conversation talking about what's going on with mortgage forbearances. So I'll let you take it over.
All right, so let's talk first. Let's tackle this, how brokerages are responding to racial injustice and inequality. We've seen a few people, and we're just going to give a couple examples, but by no means does it mean they're limited to just these companies. KW came out. A lot of you have seen the email from Gary Keller written over the weekend, where they are now assigning or creating a task force within the IALC to make sure that there is more representation across races, to make sure that we're not dealing with racial injustice and racial inequality inside of our companies. eXp has decided to pour more resources. They came out with an official announcement, I believe it was earlier today, about pouring more resources and money into eXpOne, which is something that was set up last year, not just for racial, but just equality overall, whether we're talking about racial, gender, whether we're talking about sexual orientation, etc. So eXpOne has been around for a while, and eXp has announced that they are pouring more money into it. I've seen support come from Adam Contos, the CEO of Remax, Ryan Gorman, the CEO of Prudential and NRT. So all of the companies, maybe not all of them, a lot of them have stepped forward and said, hey, we're going to do something because this isn't good. And I'm going to put on my Brad Inman hat for a second. And I'm going to say it's not good enough until we have more people of different races, of different backgrounds, who are not just agents and represented and treated fairly the way they should be treated, but represented in management, represented on boards. All of these companies are major companies that have board of directors. We need to have more diversity, not just in our agent base and population, while that is important, but if we're going to truly say we're fair, let's see it in the boardroom. Let's see it in the executive rooms, in the executive wing. To me, that's when some real progress is going to be made. And that's when we know we're going in the right direction as it pertains to this in our industry.
Yeah, if you're watching or listening to the podcast, you can hit us up on kevinfred.com. Let us know what your brokerage is doing. I'm really interested in hearing more. If you're watching live inside Next Level Agents, comment below. Would love to hear your thoughts on what your brokerage is doing. So let's move forward, Kevin. Let's talk a little bit about the pivoting going on over at Offerpad.
I was going to say, I noticed you used the word pivoting. That's interesting language that Offerpad has, come out
I
with.
didn't intend that. It just came out, honestly. But consumers can now choose either their quick close sale, right, like an offer from Offerpad, or they can choose to sell through a more traditional listing process. So the traditional listing sale's been there actually for a little while, but it was only offered to the consumer if Offerpad didn't want to buy their home. It was sort of a backup option. Now it sounds like the pivot is we're going to right from the start give you both options. I'm not a big fan of Offerpad. Let's just say that. I don't have a problem with iBuyers, but I'm not a big fan of Offerpad and just kind of how their offers look for most sellers. But I also don't understand how this is going to work with their relationship with Keller Williams. So I fully expect a Keller Williams statement here on this sooner or later. It just doesn't sound like a really great partnership, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you called it a pivot. Like I love this. So you can now choose quick close or the more traditional, i.e., you can choose to do what iBuyers do, which is buy homes. Or you know what, we'll just pretend that we're real estate agents too, and that we know what we're doing, and we'll list your property. So now they're gonna put on the hat of iBuyer and just regular brokerage. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. It is what it is. They're now saying, hey, we've got this traffic, which I think personally, more based on what I know about Offerpad, I think this is probably more of a desperation move. They're looking to create more income, which, hey, not that isn't the smart thing to do, but it's been well documented, Offerpad's troubles with finances over the years. And my guess is this is just something that they're having to do out of necessity.
Absolutely. All right, Kevin, let's talk maybe a little more positive, uplifting news, if you will. I consider it uplifting. Mortgage rates hit another all-time low. The average U.S. interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage dropped to 3.15% last week. It's literally the lowest ever recorded Freddie Mac data that's ever come out, and it spans back nearly 50 years. It previously was at 3.24 the week before, and you remember this because it seems like every few months you and I are talking about a new record low. It's the third time in 3 months it's hit a record low.
Yeah, what's really crazy is I don't know if you know this, Fred, or not, but when Gary Keller got into real estate in 1979, interest rates immediately spiked to like 18%. He tells the story time and time again, and it's fresh on my mind because I got to hear him tell that story again today on Inman Connect. And so let's put that in perspective. 18, 19, there was people who had interest rates over 20%. And now we're talking about 3%, 3.15%. Let that sink in. That's effectively free money when it comes to buying your home. I don't know what else can be done. I've already heard rumors, I've talked about this before on previous episodes of this podcast that, Freddie Mac has projected them to be in the twos by early next year, sometime in 2021 and throughout 2021. So I guess it could go lower. But geez, you only have 3.15% till we get to zero. It's not that much.
Yeah. So also some other positive news. Realogy, in an interview last week, CEO Ryan Schneider talked about how they're already bringing back some of their furloughed employees. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we talked about this on industry headlines, but I thought I read Redfin had done the same recently. So maybe I'm off on that. But either way, we're seeing some of these real estate companies now, right, coming back. People are coming back to work right now. So pretty positive sign there.
Yeah, I think what was important, the part that I took out of the story was Ryan Schneider just saying, hey, listen, we're adjusting. As we get more demand, we're going to bring back the people right away. Of course, bring back in our old people who got furloughed. So that's awesome to see them doing that because we know some people did, go through some tough times. So let's move on and talk about mortgage forbearance, because what would an industry headline episode these days in 2020 be without mortgage forbearance updates? So what's going on there, Fred?
Well, here's the quick summary. It's slowed down, which is really good because you and I talked about how it kind of been increasing, but it really slowed down. Black Knight's quote, and they're sort of the leader on this data last week on Friday, was it slowed down to a trickle, was basically their quote. So we now have 7.2% of mortgages backed by Fannie and Freddie with suspended payments. 4.8 million people, I believe, is the number of people that are in forbearance right now. But there was only 7,000 new mortgage forbearances last week, the very last week of May 2020. So I'd say that's a pretty healthy number overall, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, those are signs that go in the right direction. Again, we don't know what's going to happen, with all these people who are currently in forbearance, what it's going to be like when that period ends, if they'll be okay, how many of those will need more help. But at least we got some sort of positive sign coming. And hopefully those signs continue as we look for a hopeful recovery.
Yeah, I'll just edit your one comment there. We know Fannie and Freddie have said their forbearance is actually a deferral. So if anybody's watching and wants to correct us on that. But what we don't know is that they only represent a small portion of the millions of forbearances right now. So all these other investors out there have to make up their guidelines. It's going to be a little chaotic still over the coming second half of this year and into 2021.
No doubt. All right, guys, this has been Industry Headlines with Kevin and Fred on the Kevin and Fred Show. Thanks for joining our podcast, and we will see you next week. Bye, y'all.
Ow! Hey, it's Kevin and Fred. Do you have a referral for us here in Phoenix? There are 30,000 agents here that you could send them to. Why us? Well, for one thing, we'll keep you updated, and you'll never have to track down your commission.
We'll also make you look really good to your client. And best of all, it helps us keep all this content free. So go to kevinandfred.com/referral to make the introduction. We'll take great care of them.